Welcome to this video about level of detail calculations. We'll be splitting this up into 3 videos, but after you watch all 3 videos, you should be able to build a fixed level of detail calculation, an include level of detail calculation, and an exclude level of detail calculation. All right, the first one we're going to do is a fixed level of detail calculation. So I'm going to create a new sheet here. We're going to call this fixed LOD. LOD stands for level of detail. I'm going to switch my data sources. And then you'll notice this modified ZCTA is showing up as a measure. I actually don't want that. I want it to show up as a dimension. So I'm going to bring this up here. And what that's going to do is that's going to tell Tableau to make this a dimension. So now let's double click on lat and lon. That's going to plot a point here for the average of our latitudes and longitudes. And what I want is I'm going to grab this modified ZCTA and we're going to drop that onto detail. And then we're also going to do the same thing with neighborhood name. I'm going to bring that over here to detail as well. So now if you hover over individual dots, I get to see the modified ZCTA as well as the neighborhood name attached to it. I'm going to right click on borough. I want to show filter. I want this to be a single value list. I'm fine if we keep this to all. And then let's bring ETL load date to filters. I want month, day, year. I'm going to grab our latest date on this one, February 15th, and click OK. And then what I'm going to do is right click on that month, day, year, and then we want to show filter. A couple of formatting things I'm going to do with this. I'm going to first make it a single value dropdown, so they have to choose one date. I'm going to click customize and then get rid of the show all value. And then the last thing I'm going to do is let's edit this title so that this just says as of date. And then I'm going to click OK. So now what that's going to force my end user to do is they have to pick any given date in here, but they can only choose one. At this point, let's go ahead and bring out our COVID death count. And I'm going to put that on the size button on the marks card. What that's going to do is that's going to make the size of each one of our bubbles here equal to the number of COVID deaths within that neighborhood. Once that updates, I can hover over each one of these and I get to see our individual death rates. I might do some cleanup of this. One thing I can do is I'm going to grab borough. I'm going to drop borough onto our color button so the different boroughs are different colors. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to add just like a kind of dark border to each one of my circles. That's just going to help kind of clear up a little bit of what's going on down here in south of Manhattan. All right, at this point, if we hover over each one of these, I see the latitudes, the longitudes, and then I also get an idea of what the COVID death count is. But what I would like to know is within each one of my boroughs here, I want to know what percentage does each one of these neighborhoods contribute to the total death count for that borough. So we have to do this in 2 different steps. The first step we're going to do is we're going to calculate what the total death count is per borough. And we're going to do that using a fixed level of detail calculation. So remember, Tableau is always going to calculate or aggregate. So in this case, it's our COVID deaths. Tableau is always going to aggregate this to the lowest level of detail on my visualization. And right now, that lowest level of detail is the modified ZCTA in the neighborhood name. So if I want Tableau to calculate this at a different level, I have to be explicit about where I want it to do this. So let's create a new calculation. Create a calculated field. And I'm going to call this one borough total deaths. And so I'm going to start typing in, and I'm going to use the fixed function here. Level of detail calculations have these curly brackets. That's what kind of separates them from other ones. And so I have to tell Tableau where I want it to fix it. So I'm going to fix it at the borough level, but I'm also going to fix it at this ETL load date. So what that's going to do is that's going to fix it at whatever date my end user is picking, and it's going to give me the total deaths within each one of my boroughs. So once I've told Tableau what level I want it to fix at, we put a colon, And then I need to tell it what to do. So I want it to calculate the sum of our COVID death counts. And then I have to close it with a curly bracket. Notice this calculation is valid. I'm going to go and click OK here. So now if I bring out this borough total deaths, I'm going to put this on our tooltip. So when I put it on the tooltip, I can now see as I hover over each one of these bubbles, for specifically Brooklyn, we see that the total death count does not change. But then if I move over here to Staten Island, I see that my borough death count is now this 351,000. And Manhattan is a borough death count of 843,000. So notice this borough total death count is fixing it at the borough level. Now notice it came in as a sum. So we see 843,000 for Manhattan. So I'm going to right click on this, hover over measure sum. Even if I change this to average, you'll notice that the average borough total deaths does not change. The reason that is not changing is because when I create a fixed calculation at this borough level, there is only one number that's showing up. So the sum of one number is that same number. The average of that one number is also itself. So it really doesn't matter how I aggregate this number because it is only one number per borough. Now, in order to get the percent of total calculation, we have to tell Tableau that I want it to do the sum of my COVID death counts. I'm going to undo this just to bring it back to sum. So I want it to do the sum of my COVID death counts, and then we are going to divide it by this borough total deaths, and that's going to give me a percent of the total borough. So again, let's create that calculated field. And then this one we're going to call percent of total borough deaths. And so this one is the sum of my COVID death count divided by my borough total deaths. Now you'll notice it's telling me that there's an error here and it's saying it can't mix aggregate and non-aggregate arguments. So this sum of my COVID death count is an aggregate, but this borough total deaths, I need to tell Tableau what to do with it. So even though it is just one number, I still need to tell Tableau either to do a sum or an average, min or max. So I'm going to do my sum. Now let's click OK. And here's my percent of total borough deaths. So again, I'm going to put that on my tooltip. And now if I hover over this, so for Silver Lake, St. George, I see that it has 26,000 COVID death counts for this specific date. That this borough, Staten Island, has 351,000 total deaths. And so that represents a 7.5% of the total deaths for that borough. If I hover over another one, I see 8%, almost 9%, so on and so forth. Now at this point, what we can do is let's clean this up a little bit. We're going to clean up our tooltips. What we could also do is I'm going to click this, create a calculated field, and I'm going to click on New York City total deaths. And so what I'm going to do for this one is let's do a fixed level of detail calculation, but I'm just going to fix it at this ETL load date. And again, I still want it to do the sum of my COVID death count. And so what this is going to do, and we can even comment this, this is going to do is calculate the total deaths for the city on any given day. So whatever they pick over here in this as of date filter, Tableau is going to sum the death count across the entire city. So if I grab this New York City total deaths and we also put that on our tooltip, I should have the exact same number for that NYC total deaths 3.8. I should have that for every single point on my map because this is ignoring. So when I fix it at the ETL load date, it's ignoring modified ZCTA, it's ignoring neighborhood name, and now it's also ignoring borough, and it's just adding up the deaths to this date. So fixed levels of detail calculations, I can tell Tableau exactly where in my kind of my worksheet, as I have different levels of detail out there, I can tell it exactly where I want it to stay with that calculation. Part of my formatting here is I'm going to click on our tooltip. I'm going to go ahead and select everything here and then paste something I've already typed in. What this is it's going to give me my zip code, the neighborhood name, how many deaths there were in that specific area, and then it's going to tell me what percent that was of the total number of borough deaths, and then it's going to tell me the name of the actual borough itself. Now when I click OK, I'm going to select Manhattan. So if I focus on Manhattan, I look at this East Harlem, I see that there was 21,000 deaths. That's 0.0255 of 843,000 Manhattan deaths. Notice my tooltip is formatted, but I also need to apply a formatting here to my percent of total. I'm going to apply it as a default format. So I'm going to right click on percent of total, go to default properties, number format, and then I want to set this as a percentage with 1 decimal place. So now I see that each one of these represents 2.6 or 2.7. So this is a fixed level of detail calculation. In our next video, we will look at exclude and include level of detail calculations. And it won't be until we look at our order of operations where we talk about why maybe you would do a fixed versus an include or an exclude. But we hope this video has been helpful and that you feel more comfortable using fixed level of detail calculations for your own data visualization purposes.